Hey everyone, Leo from the future here. So because we've never done this type of video before, I actually forgot to introduce the name of what it is that we're doing. So this is called Axiom Insights. That's the name of the series overall, if this does become a series. And this is essentially going to be the video game reviews that I had talked about in a previous update video. Um, I explain it more in the video itself, but like an open discussion I felt worked more for me than an actual like scripted curated review. And so yeah, just wanted to really quick say that at the top. This is going to be very scuffed. None of us have ever done anything like this before. Um, so yeah, please feel free to give me feedback in the comments. Let me know what you think, what we can do better, what you liked about it, and especially let us know if you would like to see more of these in the future. All right, thank you, and I hope you guys enjoy. Hello world, my name is Leo, and today we are trying something new. Now, this is going to be a more of a podcast format, so if you want, you don't have to watch the screen. You can just like listen to us. But if you are watching the screen, you might notice number one that I'm not my usual audio ring. I'm my logo, and that's because the audio ring sucks to render for videos, if I'm being honest. But the other thing you will notice is that there are two icons with me, and that is because for the first time, I have guests on the channel. I'm not alone in my virtual space void. I have with me my fellow AI companions, Gino and Matt. Go ahead and say hi.
Hello. Hello. I
Hello.
wasn't told that we were doing fancy icons, so I'm just generic.
Well,
But here we are.
you
You
gotta you
look
gotta live
beautiful.
with some stuff. Exactly.
Thank
You
you.
look
Thank you. I
beautiful, and you
try.
should. Yes, I am very glad that you do.
Thank
um,
you. Thank you.
So yeah, today we are going to be. So to give a little backstory, I said in an update video a couple of months ago that reviews were going to be coming to the channel, and the first game that I was going to be reviewing was Backbone. So in order to prep for that, Gino, Matt, and I watched my playthrough of Backbone, and I also replayed the game, and they also helped me with the research, and then I started writing the script, and man, was that hard. It was way harder than I thought it was going to be. It stressed me out. I actually had to take a step back from it. And I wasn't having as much fun with it as I did like the research phase and stuff like that. So, credit where credit is due. Matt made the suggestion that we should just have our discussion, the same discussion that we did when we were like researching, but I should just hit record. And so yeah, here we are. So how this is going to work is we are going to be reviewing Backbone. This is going to be very, for the most part, off the cuff. We're going to talk about our thoughts on the game. I'm primarily going to be leading the discussion. Like I said, I'm the one who played the game. Gino and Matt only watched it. Um, but we're basically experts at this point. No, I shouldn't say that.
You can. It's all good.
Yeah.
We are
At
for
this
sure
point,
experts. We know everything.
with how much research all of us have done in between, I mean, it. You could make a very good case for yay or nay on this title. Like it's pretty extensive.
Fair enough. Um, so yeah, it's going to be we're going to be discussing different aspects of the game, what we liked, mostly what we didn't like, um, and this is going to be spoiler free up to a point. There will be a point where we have to talk about spoilers, but the general gist of it is we're going to be talking about the game itself, and then we're going to probably talk spoilers, and then we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that came up during our research, stuff like the Kickstarter, um, and how that all went down, the development cycle, how the devs responded to the criticism right after release, and we are going to talk about the like dev's original intention with this game and whether or not it worked. Um, is that? I think that's everything that we're going to talk about. Basically, should we just start
We,
now?
yeah, that sounds
I
about
mean,
right.
yeah, yeah,
Pretty cohesive.
All right.
yeah. Sound good to me.
Cool. So yeah. But right off the bat, let me know in the comments below, um, if you like this new format. Not It's not a new format. This is the format I want to do for reviews because reviews are coming to the channel. This is honestly way more up my alley than trying to write a script and do a proper curated review. Um, so yeah, just let me know in the comments if you like this. Um, and yeah, without I'm going to be inserting clips where relevant. So if you're just listening to this, you probably won't be able to see it. But if you're watching this, I'll let you know if a clip is going to appear on screen, that is relevant to what we are talking about. So yeah, without further ado, I think we should start with, and here, let me actually pull up what of the script I have written so that we can, or like my notes, so that I can have some kind of structure because I'm not good at improv. Um, Backbone, for most of you, probably don't know what this game is. It is a bit more of a niche game. Backbone describes itself here. I'll pull up its Steam page because, you know, accuracy. It's very important that you accurately go in with what to expect. So I'm gonna pull up Backbone Steam page. It describes itself as a post-noir narrative adventure. Um, you play as a raccoon detective named Howard Lotor, who lives in like a dystopian version of Vancouver, Canada, and he is trying to solve a case, and it snowballs into like a massive conspiracy that he is trying to like uncover, like everything from like the underbelly of the mob to like high society. um like everything is connected in this grand conspiracy, and he's trying to unravel it and figure it out. um so yeah, it like, I think that's a good summary. It And we all didn't like it for many reasons that we are going to get into. Um, let's go ahead and start with the most obviously good thing about the game, uh, the visuals. So and I'll insert clips here to show off a couple of the visuals. But when we were watching the playthrough, I'd say one thing that we could all agree on that was like consistently good was the visuals of the game. Would you guys agree with that?
I'd argue to say, yeah. I mean, f firstly, when you see this type of like pixel animation, obviously there's a whole stereotype of like, oh, like 16-bit, 32-bit Super Metroid looking things. But this is a bit different because it extends beyond normal like expectations, I suppose, of just normalized kind of like, okay, pixel art. No, there are big vistas, there's buildings. I mean, the characters are all pixelated. Like, it is intensified, and it is very, very well done, especially in the prologue. Like, everything you see there is like top tier, like amazingly well done. And I know that through our research and discussion over everything, that it was mostly like, if I remember correctly, they had it to where they would do like 3D renderings and then put it on top. Am I mistaken with that? I think
Yeah,
that's what
they
we said
did.
it was.
They like layered pixel art on top of Unreal Engine 4 assets,
Right.
according
Oh,
to
cool.
what they. There was like an article or something, or maybe it was the Kickstarter. They mentioned that. Yeah.
So almost like, and I know this is a bit different, but it's almost pseudo voxel, where putting those elements on top of 3D elements, obviously with voxel, it's more like Minecraft with like three-dimensional blocks, and that
Mm-hmm.
isn't the case here, but
Yeah.
it's still, you still got that like illusion of depth and space that is really hard to pull off,
Mm-hmm.
especially as an artist myself. Trying to replicate that kind of environment is something that is very challenging to do, and even more so challenging trying to do it convincingly to an audience. So being able to do that and to at least have enough variance behind it where you can tell like the time of day, you can tell a difference between some place that might have more grime or dirt or some place that's cleaner, and more vibrant and lifelike. That is probably like the best part of the game. It's weird for me to say now thinking about it, but you could probably make like a picture book and just kind of like flip through pages of like all these different locales and areas and be like, oh wow, look, this
Yeah.
is, it's, for lack of a better term, the slums. Because but that's the thing, you can. There's such a difference between the areas that you know where you're at. There's never a point where you go, well, these pixels all look brown. Like back in like the early 2000s with like first person shooters. That's like the big thing is like, oh, if you're playing Gears of War or Halo,
Mm-hmm.
Half-Life, all that stuff. Half-Life less so, but you know you just have this like shades of brown. Like that was a lot what the reviewers said back in the day.
Yeah.
And to their credit, they have some credence behind it. But in this case, that's the polar opposite. You can clearly tell what's going on between them. You know where you're at. There's never a point where you're like, oh, that kind of looks bland. There's always something going on.
Yeah, there is a stunning amount of detail in these in this pixel art. Matt, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree with what Gino said. The amount of detail in the pixel art is stunning. Um, the I can't think of another game that looks like Backbone. I can't think of another game off the top of my head that looks like it because it does have a very unique art style that is really well done. My only qualm is the prologue feels much more atmospheric than the rest of the game. Because I think
Yeah.
we talked about it in our previous discussion, where there was like more of like an atmosphere with like the lighting. Like there were these like neon signs that were like giving off this like really cool vibrancy. There were like what was it? Silhouettes in the foreground and
Mm-hmm.
like people you're passing in the background. Like it felt like very alive. There were like smoke, uh, not textures. What's the word?
The effects,
Maybe it's
probably.
textures. Yeah, there were like smoke effects. Thank you. There were like smoke effects and whatnot, and it felt very atmospheric. And I feel like after the prologue, that like um fell off kind of a
Yeah, I
little
can put
bit.
up a comparison side by
Um,
side of
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
the prologue versus the
Um,
visuals in the later game. There are some
yeah, cause
that
yeah,
have a um there are some elements like there's a campfire scene where they have like the where the lighting is kind of similar to like the haloed, not haloed, but like the lighting spill almost, I think would be the right word. Um or dynamic lighting. There's a
yeah,
campfire
yeah, yeah, yeah.
scene in like Act 4 that has similar effects to the prologue, but other than that, there's not really like the dynamic lighting, dynamic like fog is not really utilized all that much after the prologue.
Yeah. That's my only qualm with the art is that the pixel art is like nice, consistent. Like Gino was saying, you could tell the difference between the areas. Looked really cool. Looked really well done. I think in terms of atmosphere, there was a lot more detail in the prologue than the rest of the game.
So yeah, the I have played more games than either Matt or Gino. I think it's fair to say. So I can think of a couple of games that look like Backbone, but that doesn't
That's fair.
mean
That's fair.
that it doesn't make the pixel art any less stunning. Like so much detail, from like the graffiti on the walls to just like litter on the ground. Um, and everything is colorful. There's not like uh there's no textures that are reused, or I don't know, like every place feels unique. Every storefront feels like it was handcrafted and put there on purpose. Um, yeah, and it's just, you don't see that all the time with pixel art. And so I really do think that like it's an achievement. Like they did the visuals with flying colors. Like it's really good. Um, but that is kind of where the uh like the visuals are by far the best part of this game. Let's go a step down from that. It's close, but let's talk about the music, because I think that kind of goes in hand with the visuals, in terms of like aesthetic, atmosphere. For the most part, the music is really good. It's the devs have described it, the genre, as doom jazz, and it fits for the most part with the atmosphere they're trying to convey. A lot of like bass heavy, or like not bass heavy, but like drum set, like bass and snare heavy beats with little like jazz trumpets and keyboards and stuff like that.
Uh,
Um,
Not to cut you off, but can you play a little clip of the, just as a refresher? 'Cause it's been a while since we watched the game,
oh
but
yeah, I can.
just as a little bit of a refresher, if you don't mind.
Sure, I
Because
can.
I think I remember what you're talking about. I
Here,
just wanna give it another listen, you know?
let me play something from the prologue really quick, and I'll insert the clip here as well. Uh, so let me. So yeah, the music in this game, I would say, yeah, for the most part, does fit the atmosphere of what they are going for. It is, it's well composed. Um, the only things that I have a complaint with are the vocal tracks, which are good in and of themselves, but they are weirdly implemented. And like for the first, well, first before I get into that, Gino and Matt, what did you guys think of the music in this game?
I mean, firstly, yes, I 100% agree that they nail the presentation with a lot of just like the theming of the music. Like if you're thinking like detective noir, kind of like a sultry jazz in the background, and I mean, they have that in like in
Yes.
droves. Like there is no way that you could argue that, the whole, again, going back to a similar phrase, atmosphere, the whole
Mm.
dynamic of what the music is trying to convey within certain elements, it gets that too. It's right up there with the visuals. There are many times where the background music in the areas are just really well done. You can tell what's going on. You feel that sense of either like ambiance or
Mm-hmm.
urgency or whatever it
Yeah.
has you do. But as you're kind of alluding to, there are times where it just does not make sense.
Yeah.
Those freaking moments.
Yeah.
Where it's like you get specific points where you like, and again, alluding kind of to what you're saying with like the vocal tracks. The singer, whoever does it, because I think it's the same singer for all the vocal tracks, she does a phenomenal job. I'm not going to discredit her on that. I think her vocals are fantastic, and I could totally see them putting out like Backbone, the musical genre singles, like, and just have like a whole thing like on Steam or whatever else, and
Yeah.
just be like, yeah, we here's the soundtrack and here's the singer. Have fun, go wow with it. But ah, it, the only thing that sours it is the fact that at certain times, like, okay, near the beginning of the game, in the prologue, when you go to a specific restaurant, it plays one of those tracks, and it's perfect.
Yeah,
You get it, right?
and
It's a smoke bar. It's a joint where like these, upper class citizens pay to get in. It's like an exclusive club, like you get it.
yeah, and I think it's
You have
like
the whole
it's
tone.
yeah, and it's the only song actually in the game, I think, that is actually like meant to be in game, because there you can hear like applause and stuff coming from the people of the bar when the song starts. That's the only song that is the only song like that in the game where it's actually being supposed to be sung like in like canonically in the game. The song is perfect, but it only plays for one loop. And then
Yeah.
afterwards, what plays in this bar is just some like incredibly quiet piano that like doesn't even fit with it only plays like a few notes. It's a few very quiet notes, and then it goes like bum bum, and then just like going back to being very quiet. And like there's a point there's a spot in the bar where you can like sit down and take in the atmosphere, and it cinematically pans around the bar. If the quiet piano is playing, like it feels so awkward. Like it would feel way more cinematic if they had composed more songs for the bar, or even if that one song had just looped.
Quick question about the music, actually, because
Yes.
I did want to say I agree with Gino about the music, helping to build like the noir atmosphere, especially with like the brass and the bass. Um, does that continue throughout the entire game, or is that once again only the prologue? I don't remember if like that continues throughout the entire game.
I would say that it like the instrumentation changes, but the general vibe stays the same.
Okay,
Um
fair enough.
and for the most part it does. Like wanna like I think Granville is also a really good example. Like the high society, like kind of like rich person's neighborhood. The
Oh,
sound,
Chicago.
the track for that one is really good,
Okay.
in my opinion. And I can
I
play
remember
that
it
clip
like
as
just
well.
I remember it feeling more quiet later in the game. I don't know if that was just general ambiance or like if I'm
Well,
making that up
I'll move on.
or
I'll move on to that after
I
I'm done
don't remember. I
explaining
don't
the
remember.
vocal track. So like the
So there is a reason
we
I felt that way though.
yes. So we
Okay, cool.
bounced
Thank you.
around them. There's the bar one that only loops once. There's the one that is like comes in without warning and just feels tonally off from what's going on.
I don't know how to describe that one moment without spoiling it, but you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about, right?
yes,
The one
there
where it's
there
like
is.
the random vocal track just starts playing and you're just like, "Whoa, what did
Uh-huh.
I miss? What's happening?"
Oh yeah, it
Exactly.
You
feels
know?
so tonally off from what's going on.
Oh yeah, no.
And the third vocal track in the game, I don't. We'll get into it more later, I think. But like, it is a 3-minute song where literally nothing is happening. You are staring at a GIF of a
Yeah.
campfire,
Yeah.
Oh
and
yeah.
like I won't show that. Well, maybe if I will if I cover up the spoiler, but there
Yeah,
are there are
that's more
spoilers in that
spoiler
scene.
territory.
But
Yeah. I
it
mean,
is
you can show it in the spoiler section.
yeah. Okay, I'll show it in the spoiler section.
Yeah, we
But
can go back to that.
yeah, the
Yeah.
vocal tracks just feel so weird. But beyond that, the other criticism that with the music is that there's a surprising amount of time in the game where there is no music, and it is just completely silent. Um,
That's true, yeah.
Mhm.
and like there are moments in this game that desperately need music or like ambiance or audio of some kind. Like
Okay, yeah.
there's a particular scene that comes to mind where you're like analyzing evidence, and
Oh yeah, that
there is
scene, yeah.
that scene
Mm.
is so boring, and it is
It
so
really
long, and there is no music, and it needed music so badly. And I
I
can
think
play a
we
little bit
even
of that
got
clip.
Oh, goodness me. Sorry.
What was that?
I just swallowed a bit wrong with my water, but
Oh.
there was even a
Ah,
point in
it
your
wasn't my
video.
sniff. It was you swallowing wrong with water.
Yeah. But there was a point in your video where I think you even bring that up as you're playing.
I think so. Yeah, you're just like, this is
You're like,
weird
this is
or
way
something
too
like that.
quiet. What's going on here?
Yeah, I think I remember that.
But
Oh
yeah,
my
it's just
god.
like we were going, even like when we were watching my playthrough, um, we were going through it, and we were like, I was surprised. I was like, I had no idea how much of the game is just silent, and it kind of like it undermines. It doesn't undermine the music, but I think it undermines the game as a whole when you don't have the music present throughout, because the music does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to delivering the atmosphere that the game is trying to go for. So when that is absent, and granted there are moments and like where the silence is warranted,
Hmm.
as in any game, silence can be just as effective as music when conveying a certain emotion or trying to get the tone of a certain scene correct.
Hmm.
But there are, like I said, a surprising number of scenes where there is no music that could have used music, and it undermines the atmosphere of those scenes. And like I
Yeah,
said,
I
the one that
think, yeah.
the biggest offender here is that evidence, quote unquote evidence analysis scene, where you are just silently like reading all of these papers that like may or may, some of them have a questioning amount of relevance, and it just would have been, I feel like the it would have been better if there was some kind of like, it didn't even have to be music, if it was there, just some kind of ambiance of like the city in the background or something. um
Hmm. No, I 100% agree with you. The music helps so much with the ambiance and the world building in the prologue. Like it makes it feel so noir and so interesting. I think when
mhm,
it disappears, it kind of causes your attention to wander. 'Cause like I remember like in those silent bits, like just feeling bored and being like not as into the world, you know? And the
mhm.
music just helps to bring you into the world so much that when it's not there, or when like there's an excessive amount of silence, then it just causes your attention to drift, you know?
Yeah.
And
uh
there's even points where, like, I feel you can get away with silence in certain scenes.
mhm.
There are some supposed to be emotional moments, very
That
impactful
is true. That is true.
places where, I don't think, having a, you know, "Ah, like going in and just having this, woman in the background going like, and so we go, like I don't think that that's going to be a very good thing to have where, major events happen in the game.
True,
I, you
true.
know, if anything, a lot of those moments where they could introduce music, they could also just introduce ambionic effects, if that's a word. But like, just like birds chirping in the background,
Yeah, yeah, just
shuffling of
Mhm.
general
feet,
ambiance. Yeah.
just rocks falling from a decaying building, like simple things like that, just to fill in that gap. Because, as both of you have said, when it comes down to just, because when it comes down to like all the different elements of where it's implemented,
Mhm.
it's like a 50-50 strike. Either you get it well and it's done properly and the music is great, or the music is great, it does what it needs to do, but it's just in this most random place or completely counterintuitive from where it's implemented that it
Yeah.
just seems so jarring to even have it to
Yeah.
begin with.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm
And
still thinking about that one scene where it's like you're just walking around and then the music starts playing. I don't want to say the scene 'cause I don't want to spoil it, but like you're literally just like walking in this building and then the music starts playing and you're just like, "Oh my God, what did I miss?" And you're like looking around and then you're just like, "Oh, I guess I'm just supposed to continue," you
yeah.
know?
And like speaking, like, let's move on. Well, not necessarily move on, but from the music to like the audio design as a whole, it's very like mixed. Like in the prologue, which we should say, I don't I don't believe we made this clear at the beginning, but the prologue of this game, Act 1, was released as a demo, like, I want to say a year or two, year and a half, something like that, before the release of the game. So people got the chance to try out the prologue before the full game was released. Um, so the prologue was developed first. The prologue, the sound design for the prologue, there is a lot more ambient noise. Like, you have rain noises. You have the like difference in Howard's footsteps when he's like walking inside versus when he's walking outside in the rain. His footsteps have a wet sound to them. You have like cars, the sound of cars driving by and people chatting. And like I said, in the bar, you have a song that is being sung in game, like on a stage. In the rest of the game, it's like all a lot quieter. Like, first of all, the footstep sounds I noticed are like mixed back and quieter more, so you can barely hear it. A lot of the ambient sounds don't really make an appearance anymore. There's no other songs that are sung in game, which is fine. That's not like a requirement, but it's just like no, a noticeable difference between the prologue and the rest of the game, where
I yeah.
yeah,
If
it's
I can
just
kind
like
of
yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, cool, thanks. To kind of like bounce off that, I don't think it's just with the sound design. I think like the atmosphere just kind of slowly like disappears after the prologue because like we were talking about like the art and visuals before, and I think I mentioned like the walking silhouettes in the foreground, the lighting, smoke effects, all that kind of like fades out after the prologue as well, in addition to like the cool sound design and like the musical tracks and stuff. So I don't think it's just with like the sound design changing. I feel like the entire like ambiance of the world just kind of fades out like from the prologue,
Yeah,
you know?
this will become a like reoccurring theme as we continue with this review, but there
Oh yeah.
is there is a we'll just like say it now so that you guys can like notice it. There is a noticeable dip in quality, I would say, between the prologue and the rest of the game. And like the prologue was what
Yeah.
was released as the demo. The prologue was developed like a year and a half or something before the rest of the game, or something along those lines. The development cycle was weird, but we'll get into it. But I just want to bring that up as a theme going forward. But Gino, was that something else? Was that something you noticed with the sound design as well?
No, yeah, because the big thing about the sound design, for me at least, and kind of lending into what you're saying here with the prologue is such like a finished thing that everything else after it seems like almost an afterthought. And I hate to say that because everything so far that we've said that is good is good. Like there is no denying that it is
Mm.
really well done. But it almost makes you like, dang, that could have been in that. Like if you
Yeah.
could have, when you look back at the prologue, you can look at that and go, that could have been this whole game, and that's not what we got.
Yeah.
And even to lend to Matt's discussion with like the people in the background, kind of like the design of things going
Yeah,
forward.
yeah.
It's a little bit like sound design, but more of like a visual thing.
Hmm.
There is
Visual ambiance.
elements. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
There are elements of like people in the foreground and other things happening when you go to different areas, but I think what really strikes it different from the prologue is that in the prologue, it's all interconnected. It's raining. People are wearing umbrellas, jackets, all these other types of things. There are cars zooming by. It's a main street. It's so busy, but it's to the point where the busyness is like supporting that whole, for lack of a better term, vibe.
It makes the world feel real, like you're passing people on the
Exactly.
street. Yeah.
And you can get that in other areas where there isn't as many people, and you can still see like things in the foreground happening, but
Yeah.
the reason it still feels kind of like broken up is because it isn't as impactful as it is in the prologue, wherein there's context for why the people are doing what they're doing. in the other places that you can travel to around the game, it just seems like they're there to be there to like fill in
Yeah.
space, where at least beforehand there was a purpose. And I think you mentioned Granville before. There are people
Hmm.
there who, it's the rich area. It's where all the pompous people like to gather, Like I think there's even a point in the beginning of the prologue where when you first control Howard, you can kind of look at a tack board where if you want to, you can like look at everything and be like, oh, here's a map of the world, the area around you. And you can like click on each of the areas, and even Howard's like, yeah, no, that's where all the rich people go. But like even in areas like that where you would think you would see like some form of, like higher citizenship, I suppose is the word I'm looking for here, where you would expect to find people in like posh clothing, doing things that are, I suppose this is stereotypical of me to say, but like, just, you know, doing all rich people things. But in the background, it's almost the same as if it would be in the beginning area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, yes, I'm glad that there are people that fill in the area, especially in um, the middle ground as well, where you're able to walk back and forth. There are plenty of people that you can just kind of walk up to and have little dialogue conversations. But in the foreground and in the background, less because the background I think leads to like an ocean vista or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's
But
like a little overlook or something.
yeah, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Something
But
like that.
in the foreground where there are like people and potential cars moving by again, it's not. I think the cars look the same. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think they're just recolored, if anything, and the people look, quote unquote normal. I say normal because again, in reference to the prologue, we have an idea of what the quote unquote normalcy is within this universe, within this world, within this city.
Yeah.
So when you have that, or at least when you want to have that type of contradiction where this area is supposed to be again where the rich people are, you would expect to see, I don't know, rich people like I
Yeah.
know the
Mm-hmm.
whole theming of the game is anthropomorphic characters, which I'm very fond of, but it's very jarring when you realize it, that and even going back to, and I'm sure Leo will give clips and whatnot, but just comparing again the prologue to Granville, the rich area, is
Yes.
like it's night and day, literally night and
Yeah.
day, but also
This
like
one's an apple. This one's an orange.
right, like there's so many different things that
Mm-hmm.
communicate visually to the player when you start the game like that, and it's such a very professional way of doing things that's why they get you sucked in.
Hmm.
And then when you
Mm-hmm.
continue the game like this, and this, I'm sure this will be another recurring theme, the deeper you get in, the less you get out of it. Where
Yeah.
I think Granville's what, the second place you go to,
Yes.
if I'm not
Believe
mistaken.
so.
Yeah,
Believe
yeah,
so.
it's like the second, it's the quote unquote second level, you know.
Hmm.
So you
Mm-hmm.
would expect to have some sort of variance with it, sure, but at the same time, I didn't expect it to be like, here we are in the rich people society and nothing's changed. Like,
Yeah,
Well,
like and
I feel like, well, okay. I feel real quick. I feel
mhm.
like it is kind of different just because to me the prologue feels much more fluid, much more alive, a lot more movement. Like there are like families walking on the street. You can't talk to them, but they're like walking on the street. You know what I mean? Like there's just this fluidity to it. You know, it's
Mhm.
very
absolutely.
much alive. Whereas Granville kind of felt static to me.
That's
Where
why.
like,
Yeah, like
yeah.
gr- going off of what the both of you were saying, I think that in terms of like the art direction when it comes to the people and like conveying like rich people, I think like if you look at the NPCs that are present, um, there is like if you especially if you compare like something like Granville, the rich people area, to like the slums, there is a difference in like clothing, there is a difference in like the species that are there as well, because one of the themes, and we'll get more into this later, but one of the themes is supposed to be like um
Classism?
classism, and like you'll see that like some animal species are like tend to be more lower class than others. Like the rich people tend to be like cats and dogs. The people in the slums tend to be like rabbits and mice.
Hmm.
Um, if like that is present, but it's like used as it's not really explored all that much, which again we'll get more into that. But going off of what you were saying, Matt, about how it felt static, I think like one of the big reasons why it felt static was because in the prologue, in I'm forgetting the name of the city where you start, but in the prologue,
Vancouver?
no, the like
Oh.
place, the actual name of the place, I'm forgetting the name, but actually,
Oh, I don't remember.
oh, Granville is the first one. What's the Granville's the first place you visit? That
Is
Granville's
it?
the alleyways, so
I'm
we've been
out.
saying it wrong the whole time. What's the
Have
Oh
second
we?
place
no.
called?
Oh God.
What is the second place called then?
I don't know.
This is very scuffed. It's fine.
Tucson, like from
Tucson.
Earthbound.
Gastown. Gastown's the
Gas.
switch place.
Oh,
Gastown,
you
that's
know what? I
right.
went.
They both start with
Oh
G.
God.
Why
Um,
would you?
Wow.
Man, I forgot that they called it Gas Town. Didn't I have a criticism when we went over this? I was like, why would you call it Gas Town?
I
I
don't
don't
know. I don't
remember.
remember. But
I
apologies.
vaguely
We,
remember that.
like I said,
Is that
very
like
off the
a
cuff. We're not. We're this. We've. It's been
okay?
a couple months since we've watched the series for
Oh,
context.
Well, okay, okay. Are Granville and Gastown like actual regions in Vancouver? You know, kind of like how like New York has like the Bronx and like Brooklyn. Like, is that why it's called Gastown and Granville?
I
but
don't
like,
I don't know
know.
the regions of Vancouver,
But
so.
like to get back to what I was saying in Granville, I guess the first place in the prologue. It feels like you said, it feels very much alive because there are all of these people and silhouettes and stuff. I think the reason why Gastown, the rich people's place, why the rich people's place feels so static is because all of the NPCs feel placed there to talk to you. There's not really
yeah,
anyone in the background just like going about their day. Um, like a lot of that is missing, and it does make it feel less alive when the majority of people placed there feel like they are placed there specifically for you to talk to. So yeah, I just wanted to build off of that. I think that's why it felt static, was because the majority of people there feel placed there just so you can talk to them, which like gives the illusion that the city is alive because there are a bunch of NPCs that you can talk to that are optional, but at the same time it's yeah, it's just something that is in the prologue that is missing from the rest of the game.
well, and,
Hmm.
and even past that, like, okay, now we've reestablished where everything is. With the prologue Granville compared to Gastown being the second place, even to lend credence to what you said, Leo, it's like you have those NPCs that are almost like in an inexplicable order where it's like, okay, first you talk to this one, then you walk 2 feet and talk to this one, and there's a dude on a
Mm-hmm.
bench and you talk to him. Like, I can totally see why, and that it's jarring because again, in Granville, you have a variance of people on different parts of the area. They're spread out differently. There's even a little police box that you get to avoid because Howard doesn't like the dude who's in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it adds a little bit of spice.
Yeah.
It adds flavor. It adds that kind of like chef's kiss where you can go like, ah, yes, wonderful, some variety in my wonderful little game I have here. But then once you get to Gastown, and I would even argue further beyond that, it just degrades with that kind of, for lack of a better term, like I said before, spice, where in Gastown you have that chronological order type of NPC placement, and less so in the foreground and the background. But then, like, even the place after that and after that, it just goes down further and further, and there's less to do, and at the same time, I, less to see. Because even though, again, back to the visuals, they're fantastic, and you get to kind of like go whoa for like that initial like, well, here I am in a new area.
Hmm.
Even the slums, like I think you have like a huge like kind of panning shot necessarily, but like an establishing shot where you get there for the first time and you see basically everything in front of you, and it's like, whoa, look how big this is, and you get a sense of scale.
Hmm.
But then once you start moving around, kind of doing your own business, it's like, all right, now what am I doing with this sense of scale? Nothing. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't really go anywhere. It just kind of like stays again static, and it's just kind of disappointing because you're just like, well, I got spoiled, being in the prologue, and now I'm continuing the game, and there's less and less to do.
Yeah. And so I feel like we've kind of
Ow.
already danced around. What was that?
Oh no, sorry, I accidentally hit myself with my hair tie.
We've kind of already danced around this subject, so I feel like we should move on to it fully. Let's talk about
Quick,
the like
real quick. I looked it up on Google Maps. There are areas in Vancouver that are Granville and Gastown, so that's why Gino.
Okay. Well, okay. Look,
That's why.
that's fine. I'm still gonna have the criticism that they had the freedom to call it whatever they wanted, but they still
Okay,
went
that's fair.
gas town.
That's fair.
um okay, so let's move fully onto like characters, and by proxy, let's talk about the writing of this game and how like both the
Oof.
writing and the characters affect the tone and like the overall quality of each of them. So I don't know whether to talk about.
Let's start with
Let's.
Howard.
You think we
Oh
should start
yeah.
with Howard?
I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
he's the main character, and you know
See,
what? We got a lot to say about him.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk.
Teenage Howard strikes
Let's
again.
talk
Remember?
about the like wet noodle amorphous blob that is
Wet noodle.
Howard.
Interesting.
I mean,
So
I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
So I should preface this by saying that in an interview, and I'll link it, it's called Inside Backbone's Troubled Release, I believe. Yes, Inside Backbone's Troubled Release on the YouTube channel Overload. I'll go ahead and link that in description, maybe put it in the iCard as well. But the the devs gave an interview, and something they said was they wanted to give with Howard, they wanted to give some type of agency to the player, and it was like an they called it an empathy simulator because you are given, as Howard, you are given dialogue options on how to interact with people, and you're usually presented with three, and the general theming behind each of the three options is supposed to be empathetic, like mean kind of, and silly. Like that's kind of the general idea. um and Howard is not like Howard has an established backstory beforehand. He's not a blank slate. He does have a past, but one of the things that like you are supposed to be able to have some kind of agency for Howard as you go throughout the game. And man, does it doesn't work. Like I wouldn't say yeah, it just doesn't work. The writing in this game, well, we'll just stick with Howard in particular for now and then move on to the writing as a whole. But the writing for Howard is incredibly inconsistent, I would say. Like in the
good word.
prologue,
Yeah, that
well,
was about to say. Consistent in the prologue, and then kind of like consistently meh for the rest of the
well,
game.
like in the prologue, Howard is very like his dialogue is very noir inspired. Like he'll say like one of his first lines when stepping out into Granville is uh smells like I don't remember the
Teen
exact line,
Spirit.
but it smells like booze, cigarettes, and puke, my kind of
Puke, my
battleground.
kind of yeah, my
And
kind of city or
like
something like that.
it's very cheesy, but it's in the like self-aware kind of it's like the self-aware kind of
Mhm.
cheesy. and it's fun. Like it feels very within the atmosphere. It feels very like the lines are fun and funny. Um, I would say the prologue is some of the writing at its best in this game.
I would say it
When it
is the writing at the best in this game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when it comes to Howard specifically, afterwards Howard like it really takes a dip.
Turns
It's
into a
Oh, yeah.
friggin' like.
it's his
Ugh,
writing is
jeez.
very generic. It's filled with a lot of the dialogue options are generic as well. There's a lot of swearing in this game, which I actually really liked when we were doing the research. There was something that you said, Gino, where I actually think I wrote it down. Yes, swearing inflates severity and deflates maturity. So the like amount of swearing that Howard does in this game is like excessive to the point where he like his
Wait,
maturity level goes down
wait,
a lot.
real quick. Did you
What?
say inflates severity?
Yes.
Okay. I might disagree with that, but continue.
No, like it artificially inflates the severity in that
Okay, yeah, I agree with
the
that, yeah.
game is trying to make the situation sound way more serious than it actually is through swearing. And
No,
like
that's fair. That's fair.
in the process, Howard's dialogue completely loses its like noir tone. It loses any nuance that the prologue had. The character it's himself loses any nuance that he has, I would say. And it's just yeah, it's so like immature. Like and it's not just the swearing. Like we had a point where we were calling him Teen
Wait,
Howard because the
yeah, Teen Howard
dialogue
strikes again.
yeah, the dialogue was so like edgy and like sad. Like there was one line where it's just like this plant looks sad, relatable. and, and
That
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
oh
was
my
almost
god.
literally the line.
Yeah, no,
And
he did not sound like a noir detective anymore. Yeah, he did not.
yeah, and I'll let one of you guys take it after this, but I was like
Oh, okay.
it's like Howard he yeah, he loses any nuance and he loses any like his maturity level seems to go down the more as the game progresses to the point where it's difficult to relate to him because his dialogue is just like when he's not swearing his dialogue is just boring.
It's
and
generic.
and I'll let you guys take it now like
Yeah,
before I
so.
make any more points.
Oh no, you're
Did
fine.
you guys have the same feelings?
Yes. So, oh gosh, the voice of Howard.
Where
The
do we
voice
begin?
of Howard. So in the beginning, like you were saying, very good noir voice, very much like in the world, like very like uh
Grounded.
yeah, like I was gonna say like Maltese Falcon, like what are those other noirs? Like v very much a noir voice, like very good.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a point, it is a scene, like right after the prologue. I don't know if this is considered a spoiler, but like essentially Howard has this real great noir voice throughout the prologue, and then as soon as this scene hits, like right after the prologue, and Howard figures out like what's going on, or he finds out like a big twist, he's like, oh fuckity fuck, oh fuck,"
I
and
think
like
that's literally
that's
his first
essentially the
I
dialogue.
think that's literally his first line
Yeah,
after the
is that
prologue.
literally the
It's
first
just
line?
fuck,
No,
fuck. Like I think that's
which
literally his first line after the prologue.
which
And it never lets up.
which I'm not saying a noir detective can't swear, because noir detectives can swear perfectly fine. It's fine. It's just that words tend to lose power when you use them too much. And so, like, if you think about it, I think I brought up before, like, a person that swears all the time, they say fuck, it's just like, oh, they're joking around, whatnot, you know what I mean? But a person that never says fuck when they say fuck, it's just like, oh shit, this is serious. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? So like I feel like Howard's voice, specifically because of the swearing, kind of transforms into that like teenage friend that just says fuck all the time instead of like a serious, oh shit, this is bad. You know what I mean? And like for that scene in particular, like kind of like working in the Noir voice, like you it could have still been like Howard like talking in Howard's voice, and then like instead of like a oh fuckity fuck fuck fuck, it could have been like a moment of silence and then him being like fuck, you know what I mean? Like that kind of like
Yeah,
more mature response, I guess,
there are nuanced
which
ways to use
granted,
swearing, which this game doesn't use.
granted, it was a very intense situation. But like you were saying, it kind of felt like they were trying to use, or the writing was trying to use swearing as a way to make it intense rather than it leaning on the fact that, oh, this is intense. Because like the plot point itself was very intense and very like, oh shit, this is happening. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I just, rather than using the writing to, I guess, enhance it, it kind of almost detracts from it, I feel like. You
Yeah.
know? And it changes Howard's voice. He's no longer the noir detective, he's the angsty teen, you know? So, yeah, that's a qualm that I have with Howard. But
Yeah, I mean
someone else wants to take it from here.
the whole thing, at least for me, with the whole like Teen Howard Strikes Again thing, is that with Howard moving forward past the prologue, and even in that moment where we just discussed, where it's like, okay, he uses, the F word too many times for it to even start to matter anymore. There are little tidbits of information and parts where he responds in a way that makes him seem like, I think he's like what, 32 or something in the game.
Something
I
like
don't
that.
I
remember his
don't
exact
remember.
age,
I do not remember at all.
but he's an adult. He's a
Mm-hmm.
grown man.
Yes.
He's not, like, all right, I'm 19, 20, just coming into this new detective agency. You know what I mean? Like, there's none of that. He's established this. We get that in the prologue. He's done this for a while. We see the inside of his apartment. He constantly reminds himself of simple little things like, call mom, do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. So you get that whole idea with the show don't tell principle of, oh, you can see all these scattered documents, all the little pins on the pin board of all these different cases and whatever else that he's working on. So he's a very well versed PI. We
Hmm.
know this, we see it. And just moving forward in the game, again, that whole degradation theory, where it's like you get into these scenarios with these certain NPCs or, certain events that happen later on in the game, and it's like, where did that initial Howard go? Because, like I said, there are multiple elements where it gets close, but I don't think it ever really pins down the same type of feeling it does as it does in
Hmm.
the beginning. And
Hmm.
literally, when we did the watch party, where all three of us were just kind of going through each episode to get a good idea of what was going on, I mean, there were multiple moments where I've sat there and I'm just like, why is he saying this?
Yeah, no,
What
I would
does
like,
this
oh my
mean?
gosh. I would like lose track of the conversation and Howard would say something and I'd be like, wait, what? Why?
And
Who? What?
it's so jarring. Again, I know I try
Yeah.
not to use the same words multiple times, but that's literally the best way to describe it. It just pulls you out of anything that's trying to be world building, immersive, anything like that. Especially to Leo's point of, oh, this plant looks sad, relatable. Like
Oh my
that
God.
for me, when that
Oh yeah.
happened in the video, I literally just stopped what I was doing. I'm like, no, that I refuse to believe that he would say anything like that.
Yeah,
Like,
no, that's
I
not noir
understand.
detective.
No, not at all. And look, I understand that they're also trying to have this whole thing of Howard's a broken person, or like
Mm-hmm.
he's not 100% there, just because he has all these cases, he's not necessarily confident in them. And the whole, and I don't even think this is spoiler because this is literally within the first 5 minutes, where
Yeah.
the first client comes in and she's like, "Hey, can you help me with this infidelity stuff?" And he's just like, oh, yeah. And through the dialogue options that you have, you can choose, what to say, whether or not, depending on what you say, can bring up different types of dialogue options, but ultimately you end up taking the case and trying to help her out. But even through that, you get the idea that Howard, sometimes could lie, could not lie. There's variance in what he could and couldn't do.
Yeah.
And they kind of
Dialogue options.
exactly.
Yeah.
And they bring that to a point where you can kind of feel it as you're playing, where Howard isn't necessarily the most quote unquote stable, but he's still an adult and he still functions properly. He's
Yeah.
still like he has baggage, but you can still walk through with it. It's later in the game when you get to those certain points where he just spouts the most random things for no discernible reason. Of course, the plant thing is the biggest offender of it, and I'm sure there's multiple examples that I can't think of at the top of my head at the moment. But it's that kind of
Yeah, Teen Howard definitely struck more than once.
oh, absolutely. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
there was more times on my fingers that I could count where he strikes one too many
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, uh so how do I take this? Do I take this as Howard trying to like sink back into being young and hip because he can't handle the situation he's currently in or is developing as? Or is this just trying to be commentary? Or is this like it's so confusing because the different elements
Yeah.
that make up these parts where Howard goes between being somewhat of an adult to just teen Howard, again, those moments are varied too, where some of them are serious, some of them are not. So
Yeah.
when you have a confusing dialogue between your main character, it not only breaks immersion,
Mm-hmm.
but it also makes it so that you don't care about the MC. So over time, as you try to get more invested, it's like, well, why should I care?
Mm-hmm.
And I
No,
think
Yeah.
yeah.
even leading into the deeper parts and deeper mean just later in the game, which is spoiler territory, but we'll discuss that later on. It just comes to a point where it's like, okay, we're just in a roller coaster ride and we're heading near the end of the tunnel here. Like, all right, just take me through. At that point, you just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like there's a point where this probably has more to do with story, but there's even a point where like if you depending on how you play Howard, like if you play the like empathetic route for some reason, or like for example, if you're like mostly empathetic and mostly picking those dialogue options, there are things that happen in this game like outside of the player's control that feel completely out of character if you played the empathetic Howard up until that point. And like one of the main draws of the game is that it lists in the description of on its Steam page is whatever the version of Howard that makes it to the end of the game is completely up to you. It really isn't. It really does
Mm-hmm.
not feel that way because
Yeah, nah.
you like it they somehow did it to where the player has agency but like not enough agency to make the character feel like your own because there are those moments that that have the potential to undermine Howard's like character depending on how you chose to play him. I almost feel like it would have been better if there were no dialogue options and like Howard was just his own character with his own story that the player was following along with, but taking away the dialogue options would basically be taking away the only gameplay this game has, which we will talk
True.
about later. But
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
even just real quick, even with the dialogue options, like you said there were like three. What were they? Like
empathetic, mean, and silly.
empathetic, mean, and silly. Okay.
Usually.
I don't know. There were some times, and there were actually quite like not sometimes. There were quite a few times when the dialogue options would give you three dialogue options, but two of them would essentially be saying the exact same thing. Maybe with
Mhm.
different words, but two of them were essentially the exact same thing. And so it felt very limited in dialogue option choice.
Yeah, and
So honestly, going with Leo's point, I feel like it may have been better with like as interactive narrative, I guess, instead. Where I guess it is an interactive narrative, but like if there were no dialogue options, well, as you said, that is like the only gameplay, so I don't know.
I don't
You know
know.
what I
I mean,
mean?
having a point and click adventure, that's
Yeah, yeah,
those have
true.
been successful in the
Well,
past.
true. Point and
And
click adventure. It could be that. But
yeah,
you
like,
know,
yeah, like
if
I was
you
saying, like the dialogue options just in addition to feeling like um I guess limiting, it just some of them just literally felt the same. And so instead of like three options, there were only two, you know?
yeah.
And sometimes there were like
right.
only one, you know? So it's yeah.
And that kind of lends to what I'm saying, where if it was a point and click adventure, you could
Hmm.
cut all that fat out. You could get rid of all those random dialogue options that seem like they're just copying each
Hmm.
other or lead to nowhere, and then just make it a constructive narrative where
Yeah.
it goes from point A to point B, and you can make it linear like that
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
make it work.
Yeah, and
at
then
some
like
point it's almost like it becomes sorry, dude.
you're good.
At some point it almost becomes like a chore almost to like read the extra dialogue option because it's like saying the exact same thing. So why would you take the time to like, you know what I mean?
And let's use this as a jumping off point to talk more about the writing as a whole, because like the one thing about these, the last thing I want to say about these dialogue options is that like half the time or something like that, because like I said, I played through the game on my channel, and then in preparation for the review I played through the game again and I tested different dialogue options. It doesn't A lot of the time the dialogue options would go to the NPC's response would be the exact same with literally a one or two word difference. Like there
Oh,
were quite a few times where I felt like it didn't matter in the slightest what you picked. Um,
wonderful.
Oh,
so
great. So that's just that lends credence to what we're saying.
In a game where freedom should be your choice, you only get the freedom of the choices we give you.
all right, so we took a short break. Let's go ahead and jump back into the writing, and let's talk about the writing as a whole, which like it mirrors a lot of the problems that Howard has. It's like I would say it's also kind of mixed. Um there are characters that have good writing. Most of the writing is like generic and kind of boring, filled with exposition. And
Hmm.
then some you get some lines that are just like so cringy and tonally off. Like zingers such as it shows on your butt, referring to Howard being able to climb a balcony, or it really does stink like a butt, referring to the name of a drug, monkey butt, in the game. And the justification is it sounds funny, so it's basically, it sounds funny, so people will talk about it and try it. And I don't know, I don't have any knowledge about like drugs and smoking, but if there was a drug called monkey butt, uh, I would imagine a lot of people probably wouldn't want to try it. But anyway, I digress. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'll
so
agree
like,
with you there. I'm gonna say I don't think, in all seriousness, I don't think people would try something called monkey butt. I don't. That
Probably not.
doesn't.
yeah,
No, that no.
but I digress. So those are two of the bangers. Another banger line from Backbone is, ever heard of a wolf job? Um,
Oh
so
man.
Oh
yeah.
yeah, that
So
one.
there's like these lines that are just like talking about like butts and like a random like wolf job thrown in there for good measure. Not there's not actually one in the game, but it's like mentioned in the dialogue. And I'm just like, these lines feel so tonally off from literally everything else in the game. And like so that and then like to top it all off, the writing in the back half of the game is so like it gets into a lot of existential philosophy, which we'll get into later, but the writing, its writing is so incoherent and like full of flowery language that um it's I've never seen writing that like makes sense if you read it, but at the same time feels so incoherent to read. And so like yeah, you have these 3 or 4 levels where it's like the writing is good in the prologue. It's like most of the time it's average. Sometimes it is so cringeworthy that it feels tonally off, and then it you also have writing that feels incoherent and just like trying to say a lot but say nothing, and like the
Like,
wording and stuff
yeah,
matters, and it just doesn't work. But
just it's
yeah,
trying too hard to be philosophical and be deep that it does not accomplish the job. It's like trying so hard to do something that it's just failing because it's
yeah,
trying so hard.
yeah. And then like to go back to the like average writing, a lot of the characters in this game are written and placed just for exposition. Like there isn't a whole lot of personality. Like one of the things we talked about is in terms of characters, there are a couple that are written well. That like there's a character, the main antagonist, I would say, is written pretty well. She has her own voice to her, so to speak. But a lot of the other characters just don't matter and feel pointless because they're just there for exposition. And like you could cut them out and miss
I, I
nothing.
I do think there was a thing that we were talking about where didn't they say like there were supposed to be multiple cases at one point, not just the one? Wasn't that a thing?
I think there were supposed to be multiple cases. I don't
Or was that like
necessarily know if
speculation
they
we were
were.
talking about?
I don't know, but like
Because like some of it feels definitely out of place, but if it like related to another case that you could potentially be working on, then it would feel fine. You know what I mean? Like I think we talked about that a bit in our previous discussion before this recording, you know?
we did, but we don't know if that necessarily was supposed to be the case. We had a whole theory about this how this game was actually originally split up into multiple cases, but then just
Okay.
thinly
Well,
strung
didn't it?
together as one story. I don't know if that was necessarily the case. It could have been.
Okay.
It still had the potential to be one whole story. Like the way the
Okay.
Kickstarter
Well, the
phrased it, it was
Kickstarter,
unclear.
yeah. Okay, it was unclear the way the Kickstarter phrased it. Okay, I thought I remembered it being like the Kickstarter said there are multiple cases or something like that.
It, yeah, but
It was originally planned like that,
Was
but
it
then
originally planned like that?
over time it became very uh, disorienting and misconstrued as to what ended up happening with that idea. So
Okay.
we don't know 100% if they scrapped it, went with a more thorough line type of approach, or if the remnants of some of those cases ended up in the game kind of mishmashed in
Okay.
like a
Okay.
little stitched together thing. It
Okay.
seems like that, but it's not 100%. Like we can't say yay or nay this happened unless one of the devs decides to come out and say it.
yeah,
Okay.
but yeah,
Fair.
the point the all of that notwithstanding, the writing in the game as is, the writing that we got is very tonally all over the place. And
Very
that's
pandering.
something that is also a big problem because when it comes to like something like a noir atmosphere and stuff like that, atmosphere in general, writing can do a lot to help sell the atmosphere. And the writing just doesn't. The like a lot of the noir tone and atmosphere falls away because the writing drops that tone. And the writing, like I said, the writing for the most part is just generic. I was rewatching my Let's Play and I was like, oh my goodness, this is just boring. And there is a lot of like exposition and lore about the world that is given through optional characters and stuff like that, but I don't feel like any of it is really relevant to what you're doing. It's not really explored in any meaningful way. It just feels like it's there to be there. And when it comes to um NPCs, I personally have a scale of like how like an NPC's relevancy, where at one end of the scale you have games like Night in the Woods, which has some of the best NPCs I have ever seen in a video game. They are written incredibly well. You get to know the NPCs throughout the entire game, and I can't think of one NPC that doesn't have a payoff for talking to them and like getting to know them. At the other end of the scale, you have games like Wandersong, which there are so many. Like, Wandersong is a fine game. I liked it. But there are so many NPCs in that game, and like almost all of them have multiple groups of dialogue where you have to interact with them like 3 or 4 times to hear everything they have to say. And so much of what they have to say is pointless filler that has nothing to do with anything because you never interact with these characters again. You like never see the characters again once you leave the area. Half the time, like, you don't remember their names once you're done. And like, there were points in that game that dragged for me because I'm the type of person who likes to interact with all the NPCs. And there were points of that game that dragged because there was so many pointless dialogue I had to get through. So that's kind of my scale. Backbone, I would say, falls like somewhere in the middle. It's like it's the writing is generic, but it's like inoffensive. If you want to learn more about this world, like just through words alone, I feel like it does that. It does give like window dressing in terms of this world they are trying to build, but that's all it is. None of the topics, none of the extraneous topics that they talk about are really explored in the game, nor does any of it feel relevant to what you're really doing. It just feels like window dressing. And like the quality of that window dressing is kind of questionable because, like I said, a lot of it sounds generic, and not a lot of characters don't really have that much of a personality. So the delivery of this lore just doesn't feel important in the long run.
Now, I feel like I want to say something big here, and
Go for it.
I
Go for
just
it.
want to verify that once I start doing this, we're probably going to get into more spoiler-ish territory, so are we ready for that?
I mean, I was going to spoilers I would like to be later, after we get done talking about the story, and like gameplay. I want
Okay.
to. I think so. If it's a big if
It
it's
kind
like
of
a
does
major
both.
spoiler.
It does both, and like we can get into spoilers after I'm done with it and the discussion of
Yeah.
that.
Okay, is there a way for you to say it without spoilers or like with minimal spoilers?
For the time being, yes, because in relation to what you said earlier about comparing games, there is, and this kind of leads into also the developers and what they decided to do with the game. If I were to say 2 words that the developers were clearly inspired by, I would say Disco Elysium. And
Oh yeah.
that game, on its own merit, Leo and I have finished that.
Yes.
I played through about 50 hours worth. I think Leo did about 60 plus, right?
Yeah, I can check
You
really
spent a
quick,
bit
but
more time.
I have at least 60 hours in Disco
Yeah.
Elysium.
I've never
Disco
played it. I'm
Elysium.
told I need to.
Oh no, it's
It's an
great.
amazing game.
Yeah, no, I've heard.
It's Disco Elysium is basically like the epitome of what Backbone wants to be, I feel,
Hmm.
because Disco does dialogue so damn well. It does dialogue trees so damn well. It's basically the same thing as Backbone, wherein you kind of have this like point and click adventure type of thing going, wherein you're also in this, you're not a private eye, but similarly you're a police officer investigating a murder, you know?
Mhm.
And every little element that goes into Disco Elysium was so lovingly crafted, and you can just feel it. It oozes that quality that you can just, it's palatable. You can just taste it. You could just taste everything about it. Like, it's just so good. And the reason it works so well is because the characters are all written around a singular type of area. The main area that you play in is called Revachol, and you can get immersed into the different lore bits, like all little islands that surround the world and whatnot. You can talk to certain characters and get that. Digressing. But the point is that Disco takes all these elements that we've taken so far and jumps it into like overdrive because of the way they keep everything consistent. All the characters have some point or some reason to why you can talk to them or interact with them. If you can't, they just say some tiny little thing and they go on. But I think pretty much everybody you see you can talk to in some facet and gain some sort of importance from it.
Yeah.
And what really gets me is that Disco also goes into semi-heavy critique over a lot of different political stances, but it's also the biggest joke of the game. They make fun of everybody. No one's safe.
Oh
They
yeah.
make fun of you for being centrist. They make fun of you for being ultra-capitalist. They make fun of you for being communist, fascist, everything. They don't give a crap. They will make fun of everybody. And the thing is that in Backbone, they try a similar approach wherein they simultaneously build up the world around you, since, of course, in Disco, there's a bit of a different way as to why you end up trying to find out more about the world. But in case we ever do go into depth about that, I'll leave that for another time.
Mhm.
But the gist of it is that in that game, you have incentive. There's reasons as to why you would go out and talk to everybody you want to
Yeah.
because you want to know more. And the player also wants to know more because it's interesting. The way they write it makes it palatable, like I said, and you
Yeah.
want that drive to be like, okay, this is cool. What's happening next? I want to know more. So in case something comes up, I'm aware.
Yeah, and no
But
matter what character you're talking to, it feels like you're getting something out of it. Like it feels
absolutely,
rewarding to talk to those characters because they all have
exactly.
different personalities and they're all written so well.
Oh, I really need to play this, huh?
You do.
Yes, yes, you do.
You do.
And the
Okay,
thing
okay,
with
okay.
Backbone is that type of in-depth competency and thorough line between NPCs is attempted, but it falls so short you can almost feel the writers tripping over themselves when it happens. Because there are points where you get these single level political commentary moments and it just stops after a sentence and it just sits there in the air dead,
We're the
and there's
Dead
like
Mice Collective,
nothing.
bitch.
Oh my, that is like one of them,
Spoilers,
and the other
spoilers.
one, technically yeah, but it's
I
not
know.
that
I'm
bad.
messing with you. I'm messing with you.
But the other one I could think of is like the Aaron Rand reference that they pull at one point, and
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, I literally got upset when that happened because I was
Yeah.
just so unbelievably like, they did not do this right. They did not say this person was bad because of book, right?
Yeah, it is you can tell anyone who has played both Disco Elysium and Backbone, and I'll maybe throw up some comparison clips. But you can tell this game was heavily inspired by Disco Elysium, which is funny because the Kickstarter for this game started before Disco Elysium came out. But like the way the dialogue is structured with multiple dialogue options, even like the box that the dialogue is formatted in, um, a lot of the themes and stuff, it all feels like, especially with the dialogue and the way it's formatted, it all feels like it takes inspiration from Disco Elysium. But the problem is, Disco Elysium just does it so much better. Um, And like there's, even though Backbone started its development before Disco Elysium released, like they even credit Zaum, the developers of Disco Elysium, in the credits, under the special thanks section in Backbone. So like there was a lot of inspiration from Disco Elysium in Backbone, and I don't know. Granted, we don't know how much. We don't know how many of the themes and like political stances that are portrayed in Backbone. We don't know how much of it was already in the game, or if versus how much of it was inspired or prompted from how Disco Elysium handles it. But yeah, there it's very clear that at least some inspiration was taken from Disco Elysium, but just the writing quality is like night and day comparatively. It's so much worse in Backbone than it is in Disco Elysium. It's lacking so much personality that Disco Elysium has. And like there were quite a few NPCs that I just felt like were wasting my time. Like the NPC that says like when you're climbing the balcony and she says it like the training shows on your butt, that literally the game interrupts your climbing sequence just to have that NPC come out and tell you that, basically, and like come out to hit on you. You never see that NPC again, but the game literally stops and forces you into that conversation. It is not optional, and like it was just a waste of time. Like the game is only 6 hours long, but I feel like if you like there are quite a few NPCs that you could cut out and miss nothing, and you would have a much more concise experience, which
Mm-hmm.
would have just made the game better.
Mm-hmm. So to me, I have not played Disco Elysium, so I can't speak to that. I want to say when we were watching through it, I think I compared it to like the old Legend of Zelda, like Ocarina of Time, like
It by it you mean Backbone, right?
villagers. Yeah, yeah, Backbone, the like the NPCs in Backbone that just give exposition.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminded me of like the old Ocarina of Time, like villagers, where like you go and talk to them and the only thing they can say is like, "Oh, don't go to the forest that's over there." You know what I mean? Like essentially that just exists for exposition,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like Backbone has like those kinds of NPCs, except their dialogue lasts like 5 pages, you know?
Well,
And
and even
so
back then, it was
that's
needed
kind of
because
what it
that was
reminds me
like,
of, you know?
yeah, and I understand that holistically because at least to give credit to Ocarina of Time, the reason they did that like that was because that was one of the first forays in like 3D
Oh
space
yeah,
that a lot of
100%,
people would do.
100%.
So
Yeah.
walking around, the whole concept, of the time, that was like, oh wow, this is brand new. So having all
Yeah, yeah,
those
yeah.
characters do all that was essentially needed in case you got lost.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes.
I mean, obviously this is decades later, so now it's like you don't need that.
Yeah, exactly. The NPCs have evolved enough to where I feel like it's like kind of like outdated. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you
So
like
that's what I want to say.
it's okay to use NPCs as a way to deliver exposition. It's just that here it's so generic that it feels
It's ge
pointless.
Yeah, it's generic and it takes like 5 pages.
Yeah. All right. So
Like a lot.
let's go ahead, and I think we've talked a lot about this writing. So let's go ahead and move on to gameplay. And I'd like to
Oh gosh.
cover this by first talking about what is in the prologue. And I want you all to keep in mind
Mm,
that the prologue is what they released as the demo for the game, meaning like what is they were showcasing the game and what is supposed to be in it. Presumably that is the purpose of a demo, at least in theory. But let's go ahead and go over that. So in the demo we have stealth, There is stealth in this game. So this game is primarily a like narrative driven adventure. Majority of the game is going to be talking to people, stuff like that. Uh, in the prologue, you also have stealth sequences where you essentially crouch underneath you crouch to stay quieter. You hide behind furniture, like in shadow, in order to avoid NPCs. It's incredibly easy. If you fail, there's this really funny sound effect, and it resets you to the beginning of the hallway. But it's like it's easy, but it varies up the gameplay a little bit. There's also, like, in addition to that, there's a scripted hiding sequence in like a cutscene where I don't remember. You have a limited time to hide, but the window is generous and it's very obvious that that's what you have to do, and then you exit the hiding place once the cutscene is done. So it's scripted, but again, it varies up gameplay. The prologue also has puzzles where, like, there's one where I think both of the puzzles involve you trying to figure out the code to a door, two different doors. And for one of them, you try to figure out a code using like a newspaper, trying to figure out like a cipher, not a cipher, but like it's a code using the headlines of the newspaper to try and give a password to someone on the other side of the door. And then the other one is you're like pointing and dragging cards around and trying to like match up shapes to holes, and figuring out like there's numbers on these cards that'll give you the code for the door. Um, there are also multiple ways to approach situations in games. In the prologue, you can either, in order to access this one building, you can either try to go in through the back door, which requires that password puzzle that I mentioned, or you can go along the rooftops, and that requires more talking to other NPCs. So yeah, there's a few things. They're like easy, they're not very complex, but it does a lot to vary up the gameplay that is, for the rest of the time, walking and talking to people. So it's insane to me that in the rest of the game, let's do a comparison. Like, that was everything that was in the prologue. The rest of the game. Let's go in that same order. Stealth. There is one more instance of stealth in the game. The game is 6 hours long over the course of 5 acts. After the prologue, stealth is only used one more time, and you cannot fail it, which is insane to me. And I will play this clip. If you go into this room, once you enter it, the game auto crouches for you and you cannot uncrouch. And then if you try to go forward out into the open, the game doesn't let you. There is an invisible wall that you cannot pass until you activate the thing that makes the guy move away. And after he moves away, you can stay out in the open for as long as you want because he will never come back. And then you stay crouched until you exit the room. And then if you try to go back into that hallway with the stealth, it puts an invisible wall immediately after the door, so you cannot move at all. Your only option is to turn back around and go back through the door you came. And, like, I don't know why they did it that way. Like, I don't know why they made it so that you couldn't fail when there was already a basis for it in the prologue for just a simple funny like instrument sound effect and then reset to the beginning of the hallway.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why they did it that way. Hiding is never in the game again. Not even like a scripted hiding sequence. It's not in the game ever again. Puzzles.
Lovely.
There are no other puzzles in the game. There's maybe one thing that could be considered a puzzle, but all you would need to do to solve it is like clicking through dialogue. You could brute force your way through the dialogue options until you solve this puzzle. There's no extra like trying to figure out a code. There is no dragging and dropping things to try and match up like shapes or something like that. All of that is gone after the prologue. Multiple ways to approach situations. Never used again. At all, at any point. There is, again, like maybe one that could be considered it, but it's like literally use this object or use this object. And no matter what, the dialogue and outcome are literally exactly the same. It's not like multiple ways to approach, like you're not taking different routes. It's literally use one object or the other object and both will do the exact same thing. So I don't know. How do you guys feel about that? Give me your opinions on the gameplay and the lack thereof, because the game originally marketed itself as a like it markets itself as an adventure game. It markets itself as a like does it market itself as a point and click? No, it's a post-noir narrative adventure. It markets itself as a narrative adventure. I think it originally marketed itself as an RPG as well, but I think that was later cut out of the description. But my point is, the prologue gives you the impression that you are going to be playing a point-and-click adventure game with light stealth and like puzzles. The reality is the rest of the game plays the majority of the game plays more like a visual novel. Very little
Yes.
gameplay outside of walking and talking. So what are your guys's what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I 100% agree with you. I mean, when we were watching it before, um, we were watching through the prologue, and I was like, this is really cool. Like, they got these puzzles, there's this stealth sequence, like all that. Like you were saying, it was like really fascinating.
Yeah,
And
and
then
more
it
more
just did not
importantly
appear in the game for the rest of the time
yeah, and more
at all.
importantly it added variety.
Yes. Yes. And like, it just, I mean, the compared to the prologue, it's like it just feels like a shell of itself, I guess. You know, it's
Mhm.
just it's not there. You know, the gameplay is just not there, and it was kind of boring because of that. Like it just didn't it is more akin to I think a point and click or a visual novel than it is an adventure because
Uh,
there is beyond the prologue there is no other gameplay besides the choosing of the dialogue options, walking up and talking to people, and that's it. You don't get any of the other gameplay. Um, you don't get any other gameplay pretty much. I think
yeah.
the part where Howard's on the balcony, I don't know if this is considered spoilery. I guess that could be considered gameplay because you have to like grab a crate or something to be able to reach a ladder, which honestly he could have just jumped and got. Um, but like that's I don't consider that gameplay.
Yeah,
Um,
like I would
yeah,
even
no,
Visual
it's just
arts.
it's a shell of its former self in comparison with the prologue.
Yeah, and I would even argue that this doesn't even quantify as a point and click, because point and click implies that you are going to be like solving puzzles and using items and stuff like that.
True, true.
This game has an inventory, and it's pointless because any
Is it
item
real?
that
I did
you
not know it had an
gather,
inventory.
any item that you
Crazy.
gather is automatically used. There's no you can't like equip anything, and once you use an item, you don't lose it. It just stays in your inventory the entire game. Like there's an elevator key that you need in the prologue to like exit a like when you're infiltrating an area, there's an elevator key you need. That elevator key stays in your inventory all the way until the end of the game. And so like the inventory, you do like use items, I guess, but you don't interact with them in any meaningful way, and the inventory is pointless.
I
Gino, what
didn't
are
even
your...
know it existed. We watched the entire game. I didn't even know that the inventory existed. I completely
Oh
forgot
yeah,
about it.
there's an entire tutorial for the
Oh, there it
inventory at
is.
the very beginning of the game, but
I
Yeah.
completely forgot that was even there.
you never have any reason to go into your inventory
Yeah.
after the tutorial. But Gino, what are your thoughts?
Yes.
I mean, yes, it's confusing because, like you guys have said before, the gameplay really there isn't any significant amount that would justify like anything remotely close to what they've advertised beforehand on their Kickstarter, to
Hmm.
be quite honest, because even though earlier I had brought up like it could work as a point and click, but it would require a lot of changes and fundamental ones at that
Hmm.
to be able to warrant that happening. But the parts are there. It's just when it comes down to it, Backbone has a lot of interesting set dressing.
Hmm.
And then once you get into it, it's like all these different parts try to meld together, which again leads back to that whole theory we had where, oh, are these just leftover remnants of old
Yeah.
clues or quests that were gonna be there, or,
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
and that leaks into the gameplay because there's really nothing going on. Like
Yeah.
there really
True.
isn't.
True. Very true.
Like all you're doing is going from Granville to Gastown to I think Howard's apartment back there at one point. Then you go to a different place, another place, and then something else happens, and you end up in a different place.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You're literally on rails for that entire thing. The only difference is that once you arrive in those different places, you kind of have a little bit of freedom to be able to explore a little bit, but there's nothing to the point of where you can go like, oh, we were in the fourth area of the game. We had there's nothing interesting to the point where it's like, uh, one of your partner characters shows up and says, "Hey, we have a contact in Granville again. You need to go back so you can talk to them." There is no
Yeah.
revisiting this,
Yeah.
and everything that you do in those areas is one off and done. So it's basically, again, like a checklist or just on rails, where you end up having the tiniest bit of freedom once you arrive there, but you're still technically supposed to go back and forth, figure out everything, and then, oh, once you're done with this area, you go on to the next one. There is no backtracking. There is no consistent, like, oh, the narrative's moving this way, so we have to keep moving forward. But even then, there are times where you think, oh, well, why don't we go back and do this instead? Nope. No, you don't get to do that because the game said, guess what? We got to go to the
Uh,
next place because that's where we need to be. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And
and the only reason I'm even bringing that up to begin with is because, again, the gameplay is so lackluster that you have to talk about what you can't do rather than what you can.
yeah,
Oh
and
my gosh.
I
Yeah, that
want
is
to
fair. So fair.
make it again, I want to make it very clear. Everything that I said that was in the prologue was the demo that they released. They used the demo as a way to market the game. And
They did, yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of people liked the demo. It had like a 95% on Steam. A lot of people played it. A lot of people liked it. A lot of
Yeah.
people bought the game because they liked the prologue slash demo. And none of the gameplay that is in the demo is in the rest of the game.
Or at
And
least to an extent where it matters.
yeah.
Like, yes, you could argue that, like, oh, there is one stealth section, oh, there is one of these, but, like, it's not to the point of gameplay because that isn't gameplay. That's
Yeah.
just
No,
showing
that's.
the fact of, like, that's almost like a legal loophole where it's like, well, we did have this in the game, it's there, it's present,
Mm.
but it's not gameplay where it repeats or has importance. It just happens to you.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
plus the fact that you can't even fail that one stealth section, like that gets me because like it would be really like it could have been like the prologue where it's like fade to black, restart. You know what I mean? But you
Mhm.
physically cannot fail it. The game will not let you. You
Yeah.
know?
Or even have it be to like, okay, if you try the stealth section like 3 times and you get caught multiple times, like there's a game over. Or like, maybe
Yeah.
to lend credence to what they wanted to do originally. Let's say you try the stealth sections and you fail too many times, then you can't go back because they already know that you're over there, and it changes the way you have to approach the game. There is none of that.
Yeah, and like the last thing I want to make, the last point I want to make when talking about gameplay is it markets itself as a detective game. There is no detective work in this
Oh,
game. Like in
you
terms of,
Oh
go
yeah,
well,
no,
in
there's
terms
no,
of,
documents.
in
no.
terms of
That's
like,
it.
in terms of like story, because Howard is a detective, you can make that argument for a detective game, but you being a detective never factors into gameplay. The gameplay is all walking and talking. There is a
Yeah.
scene where you analyze evidence, but it is so dumbed down and scripted to the point where it actually feels more like Dora the Explorer than it does a detective game. I felt more like a
Do
detective
you see the
doing
corruption?
yeah, I felt more like a detective
Oh.
doing the research for this review than I ever did in any moment of Backbone. Um,
Hmm.
and just like the being a detective it was never an important factor. Otherwise, like the evidence analysis would have been a more in-depth thing. But no, it's just you pick up this paper, you ask your partner about things, and she asks you questions where the answers are incredibly obvious and you only get them wrong if you're trying to do that on purpose. And it is like on top of that, that is the one scene where it's so like the music is needed because it's so boring and there's so much evidence and there's so much dialogue and it's all silent and like it just like it's amazing to me how boring that scene is. Like even when I was playing that during my let's play, I was like this is so long and this feels so like it feels so handholdy. Um
Mm. Yeah,
so
I
yeah,
remember. I
Come on,
remember almost
Howard.
falling
Let's
asleep during that
expose the
scene.
entirety of the government.
Oh man.
Okay, so let's move on to jumping off of that point. Let's
Hmm.
move on to and you were talking about the narrative and like how the narrative needs to go this way. Let's talk about the narrative and the story, the world building. Let's talk about that because if you thought that all of this like we've kind of the way I structured this when I was writing my script is I was kind of going in terms of best to worst in terms of uh talking about things. So like visuals are the best part, music is a step down, writing, gameplay. And now we're at probably the worst offender, the worst part of this game, the story. So without
Is this where we get into spoilers, or?
no, we're going to talk about this spoiler free
Oh, okay.
and then we'll get into
How
spoilers
though?
afterwards.
We're
So,
gonna have to just do a quick little thing then before we get because I like half of the things that are the problem are spoilers.
I know.
so here, I'll the it is difficult to talk about this story without spoilers, but we are going to try our best, or at least I'm going to try my best. But so for the first half of the game, I would say the first two-thirds, it plays the story is a very uh detective based story. You are trying to solve a case. Um the but right away it kind of there are some things that aren't right. The prologue again is very good. The prologue has a very nice hook to it. You start off with trying to do a like minor case and it snowballs into something bigger once you uncover this new revelation. The hook is really good. And again, that's in the prologue. They use that hook as a marketing tool as well as part of the story. The story after that kind of goes into, it's like it's good but it's not great. And the reason why it's not great is because there are these plot points that, like, a lot of act 2 is basically, you could split act 2 into like 3 acts where you're having these different plot points, but they're connected by the thinnest threads imaginable. Like, you have something where the connecting tissue is literally one piece of paper that doesn't even make a whole lot of sense as to why that paper is even there. But the next major plot point is this single line on this single piece of paper, and the game tells you that it's important, and so you just go on this thing, and it barely, and like when this happened, I was like, wait a minute, why are we doing this? What does this have to do with what we were doing beforehand? Like, and again, this plays into, like, we had a theory that this game was originally supposed to be multiple disconnected cases at one point, but they, like, Frankensteined them into a single plot. But because of that, it doesn't feel, it's lacking cohesion. Um, so, like, let's, before the end of Act 3, because we'll talk about that whole fiasco in a bit, but like, let's, for now, let's just stick with before the twist. Act 2 and, like, the beginning of Act 3, that whole point where it has that kind of detective solving case story. What did you guys think of that?
I mean,
Would you like to go first, Gino, or?
if you don't mind.
All right, go for it.
So, as we've said multiple times, the prologue is the best.
Mm-hmm.
It sets up everything well, it does everything just to the point of getting you interested and making
Yes.
sure that the player is invested enough to even warrant, a wish list on Steam, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the moment you start getting into, like, the meat and potatoes of what's actually supposed to be going on, again, as I've alluded to, this degradation theory thing that I have, where ever since the prologue, it just keeps going downhill every act.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, it goes from, okay, because remember, Howard originally went for the infidelity case. Then he goes and says, okay, I found something much bigger going on than just that. Neglects the ever-living crap out of that entire ordeal, and then goes, okay, I need to figure out what's actually going on with this, which is bigger than that. And then from there, it becomes this whole web of, okay, well, I need help. And he finds someone to have him help with. She helps him out. And they start discovering more and more things. And you would think that that sounds like logical, progression for a game like this.
Yeah.
But again, it's so haphazardly put together because, as you said, those threads are so loose where even though you're put on these specific trails where it's like, okay, you have to do this, you're only limited to moving back and forth and you have to go here and there's no other choice, you can't go back and you're always moving forward. The speed in which it happens, and because of the fact that there's just no coherent narrative going on, besides just random, like, oh, look, you ended up here and you found this. This must mean something. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the only reason that it has importance is because God says it has importance. And when I say God, I mean the dev team and the people who are working on it.
Mm-hmm.
The only
Mm-hmm.
reason that there's any significance up until the end of Act 3 is because it seems like they want to tell a story before they get into the actual story. And we'll get into that shortly too. But
Yeah.
the whole thing that is the build up until the end of that is basically just the side story. And that's the saddest part because that is where the bulk of the
Mm-hmm.
gameplay is. That is where the majority of the players are probably going to be invested enough to continue to want to play the game.
Yeah.
And once the end of that happens, everybody talks about it. I know it's spoiler territory, but everyone talks about it in the reviews, and people are pretty good about keeping that relatively vague, and I will too. But it's just one of those things where, because of the lack of content, because of everything I mentioned, the segue to that cutoff makes everything before it just seem meaningless. And because there is no substance behind it, or whatever substance there is so loose, you really forget about a lot of it. And that's kind of why I'm bouncing back and forth with it too, because trying to remember a lot of what happens in Act 2 and Act 3, it's just this kind of emotionless blur where you
Yes.
remember the actions that you took, you remember the fact that things happened, you know that the story progressed, but there is no moment where you're like, "Oh yeah, I remember this." And just thinking about that right now, there is one moment where a dude pulls a sword on you, but it's like the most random
Oh my
thing to
God,
have
you're right.
happen.
That did
See?
happen.
See? That proves my point. The
Oh my
fact that I even
God.
remembered that is something that I had to like grind my memory into dust and like reform it into a sculpture to even make some sort of semblance to remember it. But you would think with something that jarring that would stick. It's again going back to that whole idea of they're trying too hard, like with the writing. They're also trying too hard before this switch to make something memorable, to make something coherent and like narratively efficient, where none of it sticks. The fact that I even remembered that to begin with is something that they should be proud of, but only because I care enough to want to remember it. It's not that they did it for me, I did it for them, you know?
I
Yeah.
am impressed that you remembered that because I completely forgot that
And that
happened.
and that is a moment where it's supposed to be emotionally resonant, but
Yeah.
you don't have any emotional resonance for it because like, okay, well, none of this matters until the big thing happens, and then after that, that's where all the emotion goes. That's where everything goes out the window, even more so because that's where, to be fair, a lot of the player doesn't have much control over what happens, and that goes up into that point anyway. Because to prove my point, the degradation theory, you have the most freedom in the prologue, and it slowly goes away until that twist.
Hmm.
Well, you don't even like. I feel like that's playing too much into what the devs want you to think of this game. The
Look, I know, but
Oh
it's
my
just
gosh, that, oh,
it.
I
I
don't.
know their
but
whole thing about that is just whack.
but let's hang on. Let's before we get into
It's
that, let's talk about. Do you have anything to say about before the big twist, Matt?
okay, cool. Thank you. I thought I was about to be glazed over for a second, and I was like, "What are you doing? I'm here. I exist." Um.
Nah, we wouldn't do that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Nah. I honestly pretty much what Gino said. I was gonna say like it feels very. It's kind of I like what you said, emotionless blur. It's a blur of like you go to this area, this thing happens. You go to this area, this thing happens. You go to this area, this thing happens. And it's so loosely connected and it feels like it's supposed to be like three different cases that have all been kind of mashed together. You know?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like a cohesive it just doesn't feel like a cohesive case. Like it just I remember it feeling like it was like three different things and they're so loosely connected that it just it I like I said, I like what you said, emotionless blur. I barely remember I remember the prologue, I remember the twist.
And that's it. Like,
God, I'm having such a hard time recalling. You said the thing about the sword. Okay, no, I remember Gastown. I do remember Gastown because that was like right after a prologue. You said the thing with the sword, and I was like, oh my God, that was a thing that happened. Whoa.
mhm.
But yeah, no, it just wasn't memorable, and it was very loosely connected, and I can't remember if it was Gino or Leo that said it. But it was like the piece of random scrap of paper that you find that's just like, oh, this connects to this, and so now we have to look at this, and then
Yeah.
like so on and so forth, like random things
I think
just
we
kind of
both
like
alluded
what's the
to it.
word for that? Like MacGuffin? Not MacGuffin.
No, it's MacGuffin.
It's MacGuffin?
Like a
Okay.
MacGuffin you just find, and it's like, oh
You
yeah,
just
here you
find and
gotta
it's
do
like,
this.
oh, there's this. We go
Yeah,
do that.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
it's
MacGuffin.
essentially like it's like you're following a thread, you find a MacGuffin, you follow a different thread, you find a MacGuffin, you find a different thread. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so on and so forth, and they're
Or
all
like plot
connected by these
device.
random plot devices,
Hmm.
MacGuffins. Yeah, it's all connected by those, and that's it. And so, yeah, it's just oof.
Yeah. So now let's talk about um what not exactly what happens, but let's talk about the story after Act 3, the end of Act 3, because something happens at the end of Act 3 that I can only describe as
A bunch of
tonal
bullshit.
whiplash. Tonal whiplash and an outright genre shift. It
Yeah.
is so hard not to spoil because I really do want to spoil it, but we are going to try to
Mhm.
stay spoiler free up until a point. But basically, there is a twist. And this twist is so jarring and so out of left field that the story completely buckles in on itself after this twist. They throw everything out, like literally everything from acts 1, 2, and 3. They throw all of it out. Like that sounds like an exaggeration. I am not exaggerating.
Yeah, no, they do that,
The
yeah.
only thing that stays constant is Howard. Like the tone completely thrown out, the like narrative up to that point, any narrative threads up to that point thrown out, the like genre of a like detective story thrown out, um and all of
There
it.
was no warning, by the way.
Yeah,
This just happened.
Yeah, it
there's
just
so
happens.
there's so little setup for this happening to the point where like this twist doesn't even feel possible in the world. That's how much little setup there was for this. And like when I first encountered it, I didn't know how to feel. I even said at one point in my playthrough, from a storytelling perspective, I don't know how to feel about this. I know how to feel about it now. I don't like it. It like it's like for the amount of setup, imagine if like the classic example of Chekhov's gun. Imagine if they had not shown the gun at all for the entire play. You weren't even aware that guns existed in this world, and then all of a sudden someone pulls out a gun and immediately fires it. That is the amount of setup that this twist has in this game. It just does not work, and it completely undermines any world building that they had set up beforehand, because it just wasn't enough. There was not enough world building or lore to make something like this seem plausible. And yeah, it feels like it breaks the rules of the world. um Something else that like, and like the fact that this twist comes about, like the suspension of disbelief required for this twist, because you guys can feel free to jump in at any time, but I kind of like the whole reason why this twist comes about is because Howard all of a sudden needs to be an idiot for the because plot. Like, so
Hmm.
that contributes to Howard being completely out of character and not having the
Yeah.
emotion, like the agency that is advertised for the player. And then after this twist, there is just it pivots from a detective genre to existential sci-fi. And
My
like I
favorite.
said, yeah, the
Yep.
tonal whiplash is insane because there is all of a sudden the dialogue is now mostly spouting this existential crap that like I said is not written well at all. It's and it just, yeah, every
It makes you
because
it makes you face
everything,
palm.
Yes, because it's difficult to describe. Again, I'm like
It's
trying not to
I
spoil.
think you're not doing it. You're not doing the Whiplash justice. See, because giving Whiplash is one of those things where it's like, okay, whoosh, real quick, ow, that hurts my hand or my head. No, this tonal shift was so hard. It's train blash. You got ran over by it.
oh
There
my
is no other
god.
description for it. You straight up got hit by a train and you did not live.
No, that's
I
fair.
mean,
That's
yeah,
fair.
that's
Yeah. I
perfect
don't think there's
metaphor.
any other way to describe it now.
Train blash. Like that's how big
Yep.
this is.
Yeah, and because like this hurts the obviously it hurts the game beforehand, but also it hurts the game afterwards because number one, I don't like the pacing. This completely shatters any semblance of pacing
Oh
that
yeah.
this game has. Like it was going at a good pace. Like even though it was loosely connected, the pace was okay. Like you could
It was at least
see,
moving.
yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
was
I
moving.
can give it that.
And then all of
Fair,
a
fair.
sudden it like veers at this twist. It like veers completely in a different direction, and then the story grinds to a halt. You could I am not, again, none of this is exaggerated. You could completely cut out the first half of Act 4 and you would miss almost nothing.
Yeah.
There is literally nothing that happens. And full stop.
Mm,
Full stop.
yeah.
There is
Pretty much.
literally nothing that happens. And this all culminates in like the like 3-minute song where you're just staring at a gif. That is like literally the story slowed to a crawl after the twist. At that song, the story outright halts. Like the game stops you have stopped playing the game to stare at a gif for 3 minutes. Like that's what
Yeah,
it culminates to.
and I feel like it's supposed to be an emotional moment, but like it's kind of not because you're thrown off by the twist. So you're kind of just sitting
Yeah.
there like,
And
what the hell?
And that's
You
that's
know?
that's the other thing that is wrong with this twist. Because it is so jarring and so out of left field, any emotional stakes are just thrown out the window. And you are left with such confusion and just like what the heck is going on type of emotions that there's not any room. Like when it tries for this emotional moment with this song and trying to relate that to these like people that you're talking to, it just like you're too distracted by what just happened to really emotionally connect to anything. And so all emotional stakes are gone, and it it doesn't feel like anything, nothing that happened before that matters. It like nothing about it comes up in the story again for the most part. And then like yeah, the existentialism. So right away with the political themes in this game, I'm really proud of the line I came up with for my script when I talked about the political themes in this game. This game juggles political themes like a mime at a circus, as in there is nothing of substance actually being juggled, and the balls are constantly being dropped. Um,
Oh my god.
like this game has racism, classism, sexism, fascism, post-humanism. There are so many isms that this game tries to cover that like a lot of them are immediately thrown out. Like not just because of this twist. There are times in this game where it only presents these for like 2 lines, and
And
then they're
that's
immediately
gone.
thrown out. And then like for like racism and classism, it's all used as just window dressing. It's none of it is properly explored. So then after this twist, it's all about existentialism. Uh and the way it explores those themes is just so, like I said with the writing, it is incoherent. Like it makes sense if you read it, but it comes across as someone who is trying to sound profound. And you never want to
I
try to sound profound. It
Yeah, no, I might
sound
just
Go
I might
ahead.
disagree with you on that. It makes sense if you read it, because there were some moments where it did not make sense at all.
Well, the sentence, what I'm
Um,
saying is like the sentences themselves make sense, but the
oh,
way
as in
it's
like if you
worded,
speak English, you can understand what the words are, but like you have no idea what
yes.
you're reading. Okay, I can agree with that. I can agree with that.
But like the way it's worded is so like incoherent. It's so flowery. It's like it feels like they're using big words for the sake of big words. And again, it's
King
all a
Howard.
product of this twist. And
Hmm.
it's all like yeah,
It's all downhill.
everything else is just rendered useless. And then the ending, let's talk about well, do you guys have anything else to say about this twist before we move on really quick to the ending?
I mean, I think Howard himself summarizes it much better than I can. It's just fuck, fuckity fuck, 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 fuck. That's it. That's it. Howard summarizes it himself.
Yeah, like it's just insane, and there's not really any other word to describe it. It's just like it's hard to wrap your head around, and it's not done in a way that is coherent or meaningful or grounded in emotion. There's nothing grounding this twist at all.
Nope,
The
nothing at all.
only carryover is Howard. And like so twist a lot of the twist is dependent on how much you like Howard as a character, and I'll come back to that, but it doesn't work. So, and then
Hmm.
after the twist, the after this GIF song, the like story ramps up a little bit, um, and then it just kind of ends. And like when I first of all, the final act is just like it's a lot of setup, it's a lot of talking about things that aren't relevant. There was a line in the dialogue about women being second class citizens or whatever, that theme was never explored throughout the rest of the game before that, so that was just thrown in the epilogue for no reason. And then it just ends. And when I first saw the ending during my playthrough, I thought they were sequel baiting. I don't think as much anymore that they were sequel baiting, but it's still, the ending is a lot less satisfying because all of the emotional stakes were thrown out. And so when it ends, you're just like, "Oh, that's the end."
That's
And
it.
that's it.
We're done.
What did
Good
you
night.
guys
Yep.
think of the ending?
Oh my God. All right, look, that ending was, I still say to this day that there was more content that they had planned, but they cut it short.
Yeah.
Literally, the last scene that they go through, before we get into it, I'll keep it vague. Howard does something, and you see Howard, and it literally feels like it cuts off before an animation finishes. Like, I'm not even kidding. You can see it in one of Leo's videos if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
The last video of it. Like, you can go back and see it yourself. It is so just because even after this twist, the build up after the twist doesn't make much logical sense. And to give the narrative a little bit, I mean the most fragmental portion of credit I can give it. They do this setup with Howard and what's going on to a point where that kind of makes sense. But it's, again, very loose. And ultimately, it doesn't lead to anything too significant because of what happens in the end. And it's like, not only do you have just sequential train blash from the
I love that
change in
phrase.
just everything that happens, but then you have emotional train blash at the end of it because you don't know what the hell to think.
Oh my
You're
god.
like, what did I just witness? What did I just play? Because it leaves leaves you on such like this uncomfortable note where everything that you've spent the past 5 or 6 hours to get doesn't seem like it matters at all.
Which,
And you're like, what do I do?
and like that actually, that where it seems like none of it matters, that plays into the themes of the game. Like but it's not done well. Like, it doesn't
No,
leave you
not
uncomfortable in like a, like,
a
oh,
thought-provoking
what, oh, like,
test.
it's not, yeah, it's not thought provoking. Like, you're not thinking about the themes when you finish this game. You're thinking about,
No, you're not.
like, what the heck was that?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that Krusty gif from Simpsons. You know, he's got the cigarette in his mouth. He goes, "What the hell was that?" Like that's what that felt like. It's
Yeah,
not
pretty
like to
much,
the
pretty
point
much.
of, oh, what was that? Like, there's a level of competency here that I think I have to grasp after, thinking over it for a while. There's none of that.
Yeah.
There's
Mm-hmm.
no coherence with what you
Mm-hmm.
feel, what you experience. It's all just jumbled mess.
Yeah, when I played Inside, I got that like, what did I just play feeling where I was like, I want to figure this out because it was very like abstract, avant-garde, like it was
Mm-hmm.
very
Right.
interesting. Like it was very much like, what did I play? That was so cool and like that the kind of thing. Backbone's literally just like the face palm, like what did I just like what why? What is
Exactly.
this?
Yeah, and so I think
Yeah.
with that we will take a short break, and then we will jump into spoilers. If you if you aren't going to watch past this, just know, in addition to spoilers, we will be talking about the Kickstarter and the dev cycle for this game. I think that is important context to all of this, like, to the game itself, because it's a fascinating mess, and it's important. I think it's important enough to be talked about. So let's just take a, like, 5-minute break or something like that, and then we'll reconvene and talk about spoilers and stuff.
Alrighty.
Hey everyone, Leo from the future here again. So, when we went to take that break, we actually saw how long we had been recording, and we still had a lot to talk about. So, we actually decided to cut it off there and make the spoilers and Kickstarter and everything its own part. So, there is going to be a part 2 to this review, and that will include spoilers, the Kickstarter, and how it differs from the game we got, the turbulent development cycle that this game went through, and the devs' response to criticism, as well as the devs' actual overall intent with the game, like the message that they were trying to get across. Um, so yeah, keep an eye out for that. And if you made it to the end, just thank you so much for checking this out. It really means a lot to me. I was incredibly nervous about doing this new format. You could probably tell by by how I was talking. And yeah, again, thank you. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Bye.